Hello and welcome to a different sort of video. Today it's going to be a scripted, basically a rant with just me and yourself, the viewer. There's no Zav this time, he is busy doing other stuff. And yeah, basically the disruption has happened to the upload schedule of the podcast, but it's just life. Life is getting in the way this time, so that is why I have found time to make a video about Edinburgh Rugby and whether or not they will basically flop again this year as what they did last season, and basically have a bit of a deeper look into their players. Should the head coach, should he be backed? Should he be sacked? Those sorts of things. But before I jump into that, please hit that subscribe button. Please share the video to a friend or to someone you may know that may like rugby. Very, very appreciative of the views we've been getting ever since episode 5, and we got 2,500 views, I think, as of right now, for that episode. But honestly, thank you very much for the support. Thank you for subscribing, and just keep on sharing the videos. So, straight off the bat, I will begin by saying that Edinburgh massively underachieved last season. Like, they finished 10th, and I feel like the manner in which they finished 10th really epitomised just how bad a finish they had. Away to Benetton on a 31-6 defeat, and it was widely condemned by the majority of rugby commentators as a really disappointing end to the season for them. So, player for player, I would argue that Edinburgh last season, they had certainly, if everybody was firing on full cylinders, I'm really struggling without Zav today, easily the 6th best squad in the URC. I think maybe the Leinster, the Lions, Glasgow, Munster to a degree, the Sharks. There are better teams than them, but squads, yes, there are arguably far better squads, but I would argue the starting 15 and to a degree the 23, Edinburgh should not have finished 10th. 6th to 8th, I think, would be a very fair reflection for them. So a lot of criticism was raised last season, partly towards the players and for the mentality, which feeds into the whole Scotland debate and how basically they've not won a Six Nations yet. It's, that's more about the Scottish culture that I'm on about, the whole, coaches are too soft on these private school boys, and that's why they're underperforming, and it's a mental kind of thing. I would think it would be unfair to say that they bottle it, but certainly they do underperform, and they freeze, they think, oh shit, what's going to happen? That happens far too often. So because of that, a lot of criticism was levelled at the players last season, but also to head coach Sean Everett, who was awarded I think it was a 2-year extension or a 1-year extension in January 2024, taking him in contract to the end of the 2025-26 season. So, as I said, I think that the players that they had at their disposal, they finished 10th last season, and you look a little bit closer into some of the statistics. 3 bonus points from 4 or more tries. 2 bonus points from losing bonus points. 5 bonus points in total with the player pool they had. That's unacceptable. I get like Blair Kinghorn left in December 23, and that was obviously a huge loss for them, in an attacking sense, only getting the 3 bonus points. And then also defensively, because I would say, although, as I've said in the podcast, I don't rate him at fly half, but at 15, that can make a real difference to a defence. And for me, Edinburgh, though sometimes they did get their pants pulled down, got a real spanking last season, a better fullback would have been kind of beneficial for them, because you could save losing a lot of points, and it's fine margins a lot of the time. It's just 1 or 2 points. You go from within 7 to 10 points and you don't get the losing bonus point. In terms of the player pool, I mean, yes, they did lose Blair Kinghorn. They were without Darcy Graham for a lot of the season. 2 very, very good back 3 players. And Duhan van der Merwe, in my opinion, he's not shown the consistency that a player of his calibre should be showing. You look at the likes of Hugh Jones at Glasgow before the last couple of seasons, or basically before he went back to Glasgow from Quins. A lot of people were like, yeah, he's not a bad player, but he's more suited to like a test match kind of style, big internationals, those sorts of things. In my opinion, he when he wasn't injured, of course, because he got injured, for me, he's shown that he can be a consistent club player, and that's where my biggest gripe with Duhan van der Merwe is coming from. They also were without Emiliano Buffelli for a large part of last season, and yeah, it's not great. I mean, you've got Van der Merwe inconsistent performances, well, consistently inconsistent, and there's no Darcy Graham, no Kinghorn, no Buffelli. It's going to have an effect on any team, so, fair enough. They lost a couple of good backs, and whilst that would have an effect on the team, I don't think it merited 10th. For instance, I mean, the forwards they had, like, my goodness, Schoeman and Cherry, Jamie Ritchie, who had the most amount of turnovers, I believe, in the URC, best turnover player, most amount in the whole season. Grant Gilchrist, and of course my guy, the Mish, Hamish Watson. Yeah. Fundamentally though, I mean, okay, they had Ben Healy and he had quite a good breakout season to begin with. I thought that Edinburgh overall really had a lack of a colour instinct, despite these forwards that I mentioned that regularly play for Scotland. And a lot of the time I thought, you've seen them at home, a lot of the time you thought, well, we don't have the back 3, or their preferred back 3 for whatever reason. And I always thought that there was quite a bit of reliance on Ben Healy to get a drop kick goal last minute to get them out of jail at home. And I mean, a lot of the people did point to the tactics of Sean Everett, which again is fair, but also first season, give him a bit of slack. I mean, you consider as well, as much as I think last season was a bitter disappointment, the season before, under Mike Blair, and obviously they'd overperformed with him the season before, they finished 12th. So they went from 12th 2 seasons ago to last season, finishing 10th. That is better. It's no, that's less bad. Now that I think about it, that's less bad. But yeah, that last defeat to Benetton 31-6 was so just disappointing. So looking forward to 24-25, I do think that Edinburgh will improve for a number of different reasons. So at the time of recording this, Edinburgh are away to play the first of their 2 games in South Africa against the Bulls at Loftus Fairfield, and it's awkward timing, but as I say, yeah. So whilst there was some improvements against Leinster last week in the opening game of the URC this season, there was a lot of good points, but there was also, it was very, very clear to me that there was also a lot of negative points and a lot of work-ons. It's good that they've got things to work towards, and obviously the first game of the season you get 5 tries against Leinster. That's impressive for any team. But I also felt that there was a lot of the star players for Leinster not really appearance. So, I mean, they get the losing bonus point, obviously, 2 losing bonus points even. But for me, they had enough firepower in that starting 15 to beat Leinster, and ultimately they didn't get the result. First game of the season, though, it's, we need to try and work on and improve and strive, for, improving things so that Edinburgh can get better, because obviously you're never going to get everything 100% on day one. So, keeping on the subject of that Leinster game, there are a few players who I thought underperformed, and to be honest, I think they need to either be replaced with somebody else or they need to up their game. So the first player I'm going to comment on is Ali Price, scrum half. For me, not good enough. But just plain and simple. Ben Vellacott has proved over the last year, anyway, maybe not 2 years, but Vellacott, in my opinion, is the nailed-on starting scrum half. I don't know why Ali Price is still getting a look in for Scotland. He was playing at the World Cup. For me, he's not good enough. I do respect what the SRU are doing with him, because a few players, such as John Barclay, have mentioned in the past the SRU haven't got the best reputation for looking after their players. So for me, the fact that they're looking after Ali Price, he's not going to get a look in at Glasgow. Let's put him to Edinburgh, move him across the country to the other club. I think it's quite a responsible move by the SRU, but ultimately I think he's past it. I'm sure he's a lovely guy in person, but for me, I just don't rate him. So the next player or bugbear I'm going to mention is Ewan Ashman. I appreciate with hooker, which is what Ashman is, you need to work quite closely with your second row. Regardless though, for me, Ewan Ashman isn't just quite there yet. Dave Cherry and Johnny Matthews would be ahead of him for Scotland, but obviously we're on about Edinburgh. Dave Cherry, as much as I rate him as a player, I think he's proved with the fact he got sent home for a World Cup camp that he isn't professional enough to be trusted to be taken away for a Six Nations campaign. And with that, and as I've just said about Ali Price, the SRU will, pull the strings, be like, no, they will, especially with a club like Edinburgh, where it's, you're struggling, we need to help you out, which makes perfect sense, it's perfectly logical. Ewan Ashman is going to be the number one hooker for the next 2 seasons, I would say, for Scotland in the Six Nations and the Autumn Nation Series. Certainly, I think that both Ewan Ashman and Ali Price are very good backup options, but for me, they're not nailed on starters. Like me and Zah have talked about it in episode 3, a combined Scotland and Ireland starting 15. Neither of them two would get a look in at the minute. It's just as simple as that. Right, that's the negatives out the way. Now let's move on to the positives. So to begin with, the player pool that they've got this season is better than last season. They've made a few good more signings, and Sean Everett will have the experience under his belt from last season. This is his second season now. He can kick on, he can build, he can, hopefully improve and go marching forward. So as I said, the squad has been bolstered with Magnus Bradbury, Ross Thompson, and Moose Tuipulotu, so Sione Tuipulotu's younger brother. They're also waiting on the return of Emiliano Buffelli and Darcy Graham. So last season, we'll touch on Moose Tuipulotu first. I've always kind of thought that Edinburgh were quite a bit lightweight in the midfield. So I think that bringing Tuipulotu in, quite a good move. But the problem is that's just one player. You know, they're not going to be like a title-winning team or anything with just one very good centre. It's quite a lot of over-reliance, and it's his first season for Tuipulotu, and you don't want to put too much pressure on a new player who's came in from Super Rugby. Completely different playing style, completely different league. You don't want to have too much reliance on the one player. Ross Thompson coming in, I think, has been a very good bit of business as well. Obviously, he wasn't going to be getting that much playing time at Glasgow. But for me, he's going to put a healthy bit of competition on Ben Healy. I mean, I'm by no means going to point the finger at him and say like the whole loss against Leinster was because of him. But he's got bottled, there's no doubt about it. But the game could have changed quite a bit differently had Ben Healy been a little bit more accurate with his decision making. You know, his decision making could have been a bit better against Leinster. I can only imagine the emotional drive of the whole. I mean, not told that you're not good enough. I'm not sure if he's ever been told that, but you look at it like the whole, like he's from the Munster Academy and now he's in the Scotland setup. I can only imagine that would have been a bit of an emotional driver for him. Hence, he maybe made the wrong decisions, but whatever. I think Ross Thompson will be good competition for him. Keep Ben Healy on his toes, and who knows, it might develop his game even further. Magnus Bradbury is a very good acquisition, I think, for Edinburgh. They've already got a very strong back row with my guy Hamish Watson and Jimmy Ritchie there. I think he'll slot into the number 8 shirt very, very well, and hopefully can just rediscover the form that he had a few years ago. And you never know, he might be he might be in when Jack Dempsey is unavailable. I think he's a quality player, and I'm sure that he's going to really just add a bit more grunt to the forwards. Obviously, as I've mentioned, I mean, for me, I've not really ever been the biggest fan of Gilchrist. I mean, for me, he's a journeyman, but whatever. Ideally, at this point, you want another centre, ideally, another second row. I don't know why I said centre before second row, but hey-ho. Hooker, half-back or scrum half. And yeah, that would be the ideal kind of parts to it. But overall, vast improvement, in my opinion, from last year. So they're also going to be waiting on the return of Buffelli, who pulled out last minute the Leinster game last weekend, and they're also going to be waiting for Darcy Graham to kind of click back into form, hopefully. I think it was a good hour he went without touching the ball on Friday last weekend, and if he's clicking into form, then for me he's going to be a real dangerous asset for Edinburgh as an attacking force. One of the best. He's one of the best wingers I think Scotland have. I mean, for me, the 3 wingers that they've got, Kyle Steyn at the minute is probably their best one. Van der Merwe does have the try scoring record, but Darcy Graham for me is the best one under a high ball, and Van der Merwe a bit suspect at times in defence. And as I've said before, Van der Merwe not very consistent on a kind of longer kind of time. Yeah, full season. That's what I sort of mean. Darcy Graham has got that in him, but who knows with these injuries? It's a big ask. Certainly, I do think that with a Lions tour looming again, I think Van der Merwe will probably click up another gear and be a little bit more consistent this season. So for me, Van der Merwe, it's just going to be a question about his consistency, with this tour coming up in a couple of years' time. I think he will be a bit more consistent, but the big question will be, is it going to be another couple of games this season he's going to be consistent for? Or is it going to be like a vast improvement from last season? Because I would say he was consistently inconsistent. He turned up for the Scotland games and then the Derby games against Glasgow and then another couple of games. But for me, he didn't do nearly enough in the Edinburgh shirt. But that's just my opinion. Similarly, Harry Patterson is to return, and I can only think that it's a good thing that he comes back. Him and Boffelli have got different attributes that add to the game. I think Harry Patterson coming back will be good for a number of reasons. One, it shows that there's progression through the Scottish youth model, and he will learn quite a lot if he is fit and is in the Scotland camp, learn from Blair Kinghorn. And I also think that you don't know what the injury status of Boffelli is going to be this season, so if you've got somebody else as capable as Harry Patterson, stick him in. So I am confident between the factors of Sean Everett's experience from last season, learning from last season what went right, what went wrong, new signings, returning players from injury, and just better luck with injuries as a whole. I do expect Edinburgh to finish somewhere between 6th and 8th. In the graphic I put out on Twitter, I think I put them in to be 7th, just as a kind of middle of the road kind of thing. Failure to get even 8th, and I think it's very, very difficult to justify any more contract extensions with Sean Everett. If they finish worse than last season even, for me he's got to go. But for me, if they should be getting between 6th and 8th, and if they don't get 8th, then questions have got to be raised about the head coach. And if they get worse than last season, for me, Everett's got to go. But I do think, I am optimistic that I think he's got a plan in his mind. He'll have learned a lot of things about the league, about his own players, what makes them tick, what doesn't. I am confident that Edinburgh will improve this season, so for me, hopefully, as well, I don't think that they're going to flop. Anyway, yeah, so thank you for sticking around if you've made it this long. It's something different, but, we've got subscribers we need to keep happy. We've got random viewers tuning in. I think it was like 1,500 from South Africa in episode 5, so I have told Zav to be nicer about the Springboks so that, he can come back. But thank you very much for tuning in. Thank you very much for liking, for commenting. And yeah, we'll see you in the next video.